Don't move. We don't want this to get any more complicated.
Do what's right. She's just a child.
Sir, you're not in charge here.
72-year-old Marine said he'd handle it calmly. Then this happened. Frank "Gunny" Rodriguez, a decorated Marine veteran, was tased for no reason while walking with his granddaughter. Minutes later, Marines arrived, turning a quiet neighborhood into a scene of justice and brotherhood that would change everything. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Lincoln Park's tree-lined streets, where gentrification had painted over decades of working-class history with trendy coffee shops and boutique stores. Children's laughter echoed from the nearby playground, while joggers navigated around families pushing strollers. The crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves and the distant aroma of coffee from the corner cafe. Frank "Gunny" Rodriguez walked slowly down Fullerton Avenue, his weathered hand gently holding that of his 8-year-old granddaughter, Sophia. At 72, Frank still carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a Marine, though his left leg bore a slight limp from shrapnel he'd collected in Grenada 4 decades earlier. His silver hair was cropped military short, and his brown eyes held the quiet confidence of a man who'd seen the world's worst and somehow maintained faith in its best. Frank had earned his nickname "Gunny" during 26 years of distinguished service, including 3 combat deployments and a Bronze Star for valor. The scars on his hands told stories of midnight patrols and desperate firefights, but his gentle touch with Sophia revealed the grandfather who read bedtime stories and helped with homework. After retiring from the Corps, he'd built a successful security consulting business, eventually selling it to spend more time with family. His late wife, Maria, had always said he was too serious, too focused on duty, but Sophia brought out a gentleness in him that surprised everyone, including himself. The little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile had become his world since Maria's passing 2 years earlier. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he picked Sophia up from school and walked her to art class at the community center, their special time together that he treasured more than any medal. The old Marine had noticed increased police activity in his neighborhood recently. Squad cars cruised the streets more frequently, and neighbors whispered about new community policing initiatives that felt more like occupation than protection. Frank believed in law and order. He'd spent his life defending both, but he also believed in accountability. When he saw Officer Derek Mason aggressively questioning Mrs. Chen, the elderly Korean war widow who lived 3 houses down, Frank knew something was wrong. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. The opportunity came when Frank spotted Officer Mason's patrol car, parked outside the local community center, where Sophia was scheduled for her art class. Mason, a 24-year-old rookie with barely 3 months on the force, was leaning against his vehicle, scrolling through his phone with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. His uniform was crisp, his badge shiny, but his posture screamed inexperience and entitlement. Frank made his decision in that moment. He would approach respectfully, professionally, the way he'd been trained to handle difficult situations. "Sophia, sweetheart," he said, kneeling to her level, "Grandpa needs to talk to the police officer for just a minute. Stay right beside me, okay?" The little girl nodded, trusting her grandfather completely. Frank's strategy was simple: engage respectfully, gather information, and perhaps build a bridge between the community and law enforcement. He'd handled tenser situations in boardrooms and battlefields alike. His approach relied on his natural ability to read people and find common ground skills that had served him well in military leadership and business negotiations. He would introduce himself as a concerned neighbor, mention his military service to establish credibility, and ask polite questions about the increased police presence. Frank had dealt with young officers before in his consulting work. Most responded well to respectful authority and genuine interest in their mission. The veteran straightened his shoulders, took Sophia's hand, and approached with the measured confidence of someone accustomed to command. He had no idea that Officer Derek Mason was about to shatter every assumption about professional law enforcement that Frank had built over 7 decades of life. "Excuse me, officer," Frank said in the calm, measured tone that had once commanded respect from Marines half his age. "I'm Frank Rodriguez, been living in this neighborhood for 15 years. I wanted to ask about the increased patrols lately. Some of the elderly residents are feeling intimidated." Mason looked up from his phone, immediately sizing up the older man with the kind of dismissive glance reserved for people he considered irrelevant. The officer's training had taught him to assert dominance quickly, and Frank's respectful approach registered as weakness rather than courtesy. Mason's eyes flicked to Sophia, then back to Frank, calculating his response. "What's it to you, old man?" Mason's voice carried an edge that made Frank's protective instincts sharpen. "You got some problem with police doing their job?" The officer stepped closer, using his height advantage to intimidate, a tactic that might have worked on someone who hadn't faced down enemy soldiers in 3 different countries. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. Frank remained calm, his voice steady despite the officer's aggressive posture. "No problem at all, officer. I'm a veteran myself, Marine Corps, 26 years. I understand the importance of community safety. I'm just concerned about some of the interactions I've witnessed." Mason's expression hardened further. The mention of military service seemed to irritate rather than impress him. "Yeah, well, this isn't the Marine's grandpa. This is my beat, and I don't need some old soldier telling me how to do my job." He stepped even closer, his hand moving instinctively toward his belt. Sophia pressed closer to Frank's side, her 8-year-old instincts sensing danger, even if she couldn't understand the adult tension. Frank gently squeezed her hand, a signal they'd practiced that meant, "Stay calm and stay close." The veteran's mind began calculating exit strategies while his grandfather's heart broke at having to shield an innocent child from this madness. Other pedestrians began to slow their pace, sensing the tension, but unsure whether to intervene. A jogger stopped to retie her shoes, clearly eavesdropping. A woman walking her dog paused to let the animal sniff a fire hydrant, her eyes fixed on the confrontation. A few pulled out phones, but most just stared, uncomfortably caught between concern and the ingrained reluctance to interfere with police business. Among the growing crowd was Marine Sergeant Elena Santos, off-duty and in civilian clothes, who had been jogging past when the confrontation began. Santos immediately recognized the dynamic, a young officer escalating unnecessarily against someone who posed no threat. She slowed her pace, positioning herself where she could observe and, if necessary, intervene. Santos pulled out her phone and began recording her military training, telling her that documentation might be crucial. She also sent a quick text to her Marine Corps League group chat. "Situation developing at Lincoln Park Community Center. Elderly vet being harassed by cop. May need backup." Mason's demands became increasingly unreasonable. "I can smell alcohol on you." He lied, his voice loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "I think you've been drinking and driving with that kid in the car." Frank's pickup truck was parked legally 3 blocks away, and he hadn't consumed alcohol in over 20 years, a fact that would later be easily verified. "Officer, I haven't had a drink in over 20 years, Frank replied calmly. "I'm simply concerned about my neighbors. We can continue this conversation, but I'd like to get my granddaughter to her art class first." He gestured toward the community center, where other children were arriving with their parents. The reasonableness of Frank's request seemed to enrage Mason further. "You're not going anywhere until I say so. I'm conducting an investigation here. Aniron Turi." He moved his hand to his taser, a gesture that sent a chill through the watching crowd. Several people began recording more openly, sensing that something terrible was about to happen. Frank realized with growing alarm that Mason had already decided how this encounter would end, regardless of logic or law. The veteran's protective instincts kicked into overdrive as he positioned himself between Mason and Sophia. His military training automatically calculated angles and distances, while his grandfather's heart focused on keeping his granddaughter safe. "Sophia," he said quietly, "remember what Grandpa taught you about staying calm. I need you to be very brave right now." "Free." The little girl nodded, her trust in her grandfather absolute, even as tears began forming in her eyes. Frank's voice remained steady, but inside he was preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. Santos had moved closer, her phone still recording, as she texted rapid updates to her Marine contacts. Within minutes, she received responses from 3 other Marines in the area, all indicating they were en route. The brotherhood that had sustained them through deployments was about to be tested on a Chicago sidewalk. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. The tasing happened so quickly that bystanders barely had time to react. Mason's justification was a mumbled claim about resisting arrest, though Frank had made no aggressive moves and was guilty of no crime beyond asking questions. The 50,000 volts coursed through the 72-year-old veteran's body, sending him crashing to the concrete sidewalk with a sickening thud. Sophia's screams pierced the afternoon air as her grandfather lay convulsing on the pavement. The little girl tried to run to him, but a bystander gently held her back, understanding that the situation was far from over. Frank's military ID scattered across the sidewalk, where Mason had knocked it during the assault, the Bronze Star citation, clearly visible among the scattered papers. The crowd's reaction was immediate and visceral. Several people began shouting at Mason, demanding to know why he had attacked an elderly man who posed no threat. The officer, realizing that his actions were being recorded from multiple angles, began barking orders for people to back up and stop interfering with police business. But the damage was done. The video footage clearly showed an unprovoked assault on a senior citizen who had been holding his granddaughter's hand. Mason's claims of resistance or threat would be impossible to justify when reviewed by any reasonable person. As Frank struggled to regain consciousness, Santos made a decision that would change everything. She stepped forward, identifying herself as an active duty Marine and announcing that she had recorded the entire incident. "That man is a decorated veteran," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He served this country for 26 years and you just assaulted him for asking questions." Mason, already rattled by the crowd's reaction, became increasingly aggressive. "I don't care if he's George Washington," he snapped. He was resisting arrest, but his voice lacked conviction, and the watching crowd could see through his desperate attempts at justification. Santos continued recording while simultaneously live-streaming the incident to her social media accounts. Within minutes, the video was being shared across veteran networks, local community groups, and social justice organizations. The power of modern communication was about to collide with old-fashioned military brotherhood. The crucial moment came when Frank, despite his pain and disorientation, managed to sit up and check on Sophia. His first words weren't complaints about his treatment or demands for justice. They were gentle reassurances to his frightened granddaughter. "It's okay, sweetheart. Grandpa's okay. The nice lady is helping us." That display of grace under pressure, captured on multiple cameras, would become the defining image of the entire incident. Here was a decorated veteran unjustly attacked and injured, whose primary concern was comforting a frightened child. The contrast between Frank's dignity and Mason's aggression couldn't have been starker. Within 4 minutes of Santos's initial text, the first Marine reinforcements arrived. Corporal Mike Jackson, still in his dress blues from a recruiting event, appeared with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to handling crises. Staff Sergeant Williams followed 60 seconds later, having abandoned his lunch meeting the moment Santos's call came through. The Marines didn't threaten or escalate, they simply bore witness with the quiet authority that comes from genuine strength. Their presence transformed the dynamic completely. Mason, who had felt invincible while terrorizing an elderly man and child, now found himself surrounded by people who understood both military service and proper law enforcement procedures. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. This event marked a significant moment in the community, highlighting the need for change and justice. The Marines formed a protective perimeter around Frank and Sophia, their discipline absolute. Sonos continued live streaming while Jackson photographed Mason's badge number and patrol car details. Williams knelt beside Sophia, comforting the frightened child while keeping his movements slow and visible to avoid giving Mason any excuse for further aggression. Their coordination was seamless, born from years of training and shared values. Each Marine had a specific role. Santos documented everything, Jackson gathered evidence, and Williams provided security and comfort. They communicated through subtle gestures and brief eye contact, their military bearing a stark contrast to Mason's increasingly erratic behavior. Other officers began arriving on scene, but their response was telling. Instead of automatically supporting their colleague, several positioned themselves away from Mason, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. The thin blue line was fracturing in real time as decent cops realized they were watching something indefensible. For a moment, Frank wondered if he should have just walked away, avoided the confrontation entirely. The sight of Sophia's tear-streaked face made him question whether his sense of duty was worth traumatizing his granddaughter. But then he remembered Mrs. Chen, the elderly widow who had been too frightened to speak up about her own harassment. Mason seemed to realize that the situation had spiraled beyond his control. His radio crackled with demands for updates from dispatch, and he could see supervisors arriving in the distance. The rookie officer who had felt so powerful minutes earlier now looked like what he was, a young man who had made a catastrophic error in judgment. The crowd had grown to nearly 50 people, many of them recording and live streaming. Local news crews were already en route, alerted by the viral social media posts. What had started as a simple question about community policing was about to become a national story about police accountability and veteran rights. The arrival of Mason's supervisor, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, no relation to the elderly widow, marked the beginning of the end for the rookie officer. Chen took one look at the scene, an elderly veteran sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by Marines, a crying child, and dozens of witnesses with cameras, and immediately understood the magnitude of the situation. Officer Mason stepped back. She ordered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen enough police misconduct to recognize it instantly. "Everyone else, please give us some space while we sort this out." But the Marines didn't move, their protective formation around Frank and Sophia remaining solid. Chen approached Frank directly, her demeanor respectful and professional. "Sir, I'm Lieutenant Chen. I understand there's been an incident. Are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" Her tone was everything Mason should have been: courteous, concerned, and appropriate for addressing a senior citizen. Frank's response would be remembered by everyone present. Despite his pain and the injustice he had suffered, he remained dignified and measured. "Lieutenant, I'm okay. My main concern is my granddaughter. She's frightened and needs to get to her art class. We can discuss what happened after I make sure she's safe." Mason attempted to interrupt, claiming that Frank was under arrest for resisting, but Chen silenced him with a look that could have melted steel. The lieutenant had reviewed enough excessive force cases to recognize one in progress, and she wasn't about to let a rookie officer destroy her department's reputation further. The crowd's mood was growing uglier by the minute. Shouts of "fire him" and "arrest the cop" began echoing through the street. Chen realized that she was facing a potential riot if the situation wasn't handled properly. The presence of the Marines was actually helping to keep things calm. Their discipline was preventing the crowd from becoming a mob. Sano stepped forward, her phone still recording. "Lieutenant, I'm Sergeant Elena Santos, United States Marine Corps. I witnessed the entire incident. Officer Mason attacked Mr. Rodriguez without provocation while he was holding his granddaughter's hand. I have video evidence of everything." The weight of that statement settled over the scene like a blanket. Video evidence from a credible military witness would be impossible to dismiss or discredit. Chen looked at Mason, then at the crowd, then at Frank, and made the decision that would define her career. "Officer Mason, you're suspended pending investigation." Chen announced loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "Remove your badge and weapon. Report to Internal Affairs immediately." Oh, the rookie officer's face went white as he realized his career was over before it had really begun. But the real turning point came when Frank stood up, supported by Williams, and addressed the crowd. "I appreciate everyone's concern," he said, his voice carrying despite his obvious pain. "But I want to make something clear. This isn't about hating police. This is about holding everyone accountable to the same standards of decency and respect." The crowd quieted, listening to the elderly veteran who had just been assaulted, but was calling for justice rather than revenge. "I served this country for 26 years because I believe in what it stands for. That includes the rule of law and equal treatment under it. What happened here today was wrong, but the answer isn't more anger. It's better training, better oversight, and better leadership." Sophia, still frightened, but drawing courage from her grandfather's calm strength, stepped forward and took his hand. The image of the elderly veteran and his granddaughter surrounded by Marines and speaking words of wisdom to an angry crowd would become iconic. The breakthrough came when other officers on scene began openly distancing themselves from Mason's actions. One approached Frank to formally apologize for his colleague's behavior. Another offered to escort Sophia to her art class personally. The message was clear: this wasn't about cops versus civilians, it was about right versus wrong. Chen's handling of the situation became a textbook example of crisis management. She ensured Frank received medical attention, arranged for Sophia to be safely delivered to her art class, and began the investigation process immediately. Her professionalism stood in stark contrast to Mason's aggression, showing that law enforcement could be both effective and respectful. Within 6 hours, the video had been viewed over 2 million times across various social media platforms. News crews from every major network descended on Lincoln Park, transforming the quiet neighborhood into a media circus. Frank, released from the hospital with minor injuries, found himself at the center of a national conversation about police reform and veteran rights. Mason was not only suspended, but arrested on charges of assault under color of authority. The district attorney, recognizing the political and legal implications of the case, announced that it would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. The rookie officer, who had felt so powerful that afternoon, was now facing potential prison time and the end of his law enforcement career. The immediate community response was overwhelmingly supportive of Frank. Neighbors who had been too frightened to speak up about their own negative police encounters began coming forward with their stories. Mrs. Chen, the elderly widow whose harassment had originally motivated Frank to act publicly, thanked him for his courage. The Frank Rodriguez Act, passed by the state legislature 6 months later, mandated enhanced training for police interactions with veterans and elderly citizens. It also established independent oversight boards with veteran representation to investigate complaints against officers. The legislation became a model for other states dealing with similar issues. Frank used his $2.3 million settlement to establish the Rodriguez Foundation, providing legal support for elderly victims of police brutality. The foundation's first case involved Mrs. Chen, creating a full-circle moment that demonstrated how one act of courage could ripple outward to help others. The incident became a teaching moment for police departments nationwide, demonstrating what happens when officers mistake authority for license to abuse. Training videos featuring Frank's story were distributed to academies across the country, showing how dignity and restraint could triumph over aggression and intimidation. Police departments began implementing new protocols for interactions with elderly citizens and veterans, recognizing that these populations deserve special consideration and respect. The changes weren't just policy, they represented a cultural shift toward viewing law enforcement as a service profession rather than an occupation force. 3 months after the verdict, Frank received a letter from the Marine Corps League thanking him for his dignity under fire and his example of how veterans should conduct themselves. But the real victory came when Sophia, now 9, proudly told her preschool class about how her grandfather and his Marine friends had stood up to a bully.